Yesterday, US Weekly broke the news that Nicki Minaj's house is at risk of being seized due to a lawsuit. And now I'm not a lawyer, but I read through the case filings to try and figure out how we got here. So let me give you the recap on what's going on. So this actually has to do with something that happened back in March of 2019. A German man by the name of Thomas Weidenmuller was assigned as head of security for a tour stop that Nicki was doing in Germany. It was the Nicki World Tour, and during this particular concert, a fan was somehow able to bypass a female security guard and get on the stage with Nicki. The fan didn't harm anyone or anything, but they did make it on stage, got a little dancing, and then Nicki's personal security team apprehended the person in under 10 seconds and then escorted them off the stage. Now, according to Thomas, who again is the head of security, after the concert wraps up, Nicki and a number of people from her team confront the female security guard as well as a second security guard about this fan getting on the stage. Thomas says Nicki was yelling and screaming and falsely accusing them of putting her in danger, but he told the guards to just be quiet and listen to her complaints. Now, according to Thomas, at one point, the female security guard began crying and apologizing, but in response to that, Nicki began recording this confrontation and then demanded that the security guard tell Nicki's fans that she failed to do her job properly and that she put Nicki in danger. So Thomas says at this point he steps in because he didn't want this whole recording to happen. And as a result, Nicki threw a shoe at him, allegedly, but she missed. So this first confrontation dies down, and then the security team goes back to helping guests exit the building. But then Thomas gets called backstage. And this time it's Kenneth Petty, who at the time was Nicki Minaj's boyfriend. So Kenneth and Thomas exchange words, and Thomas says that this interaction was actually pretty pleasant. He says Kenneth tells him there must have been some kind of misunderstanding, and the two of them part ways in a pretty calm manner. Now, 2.5 hours after that, Nicki and her team are still at the venue, and security is also still at the venue. And Thomas gets called backstage again. And this time he says the confrontation is back heated. He says Nicki was shouting at him, and as that's happening, Kenneth kind of positions himself out of sight. And then out of nowhere, Kenneth allegedly punches Thomas from the side and breaks his jaw. According to Thomas, he steps around the corner to step away for a second, and by the time he comes back around the corner, Nicki and her team have left the building. Thomas calls the police and an arrest warrant is issued for Kenneth Petty, but apparently Kenneth Petty leaves the country. Nicki had another tour stop in Germany, so she stayed. And so that's the background. And again, this incident happened in March of 2019. So fast forward to January of 2022, and Thomas, the head of security, has now filed a lawsuit against Nicki Minaj and Kenneth Petty. He sues them for battery, for being hit, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, and conspiracy because he says Nicki is the one who basically egged Kenneth Petty on, and that's the reason Kenneth ended up hitting him. So Thomas files this lawsuit, and as you know, or should know, after you file a lawsuit, you have to notify or serve the people you are suing. And Thomas says he's trying to serve them, but they keep avoiding it. According to Thomas, the first time he tried to serve Nicki and Kenneth was in February of 2022. And he notes that because Kenneth Petty is a registered offender, his address has to be listed on the registered offenders list. So being clear about where they live and what their address is theoretically not a problem. In the documents, Thomas's attorney notes that Kenneth Petty actually got in trouble and was sentenced to house arrest for moving to California in 2019 and not registering his California address with the registry. The point here being, as of 2022, Nicki and Kenneth's address has been on this list, and this lawsuit was also filed in 2022. So Thomas's team is saying, we got the right address. And yet, the documents that were sent first-class mail to this address never got a reply. So from there, Thomas and his team hire a process server company. And they send an investigator out to the address, which again is listed on the registry, to go personally serve Nicki and Kenneth. But she also says she was not successful. This process server says the first time she tried to serve them was February 16, 2022, but no one answered the door, and she notes that they apparently never answered the door. She then tried the next day, which was February 17th, and then the next day, which was the 18th, and then the next day, which was the 19th. But again, she says every time she went, there was no answer. By February 27th, the server says she tried a different tactic, and this time she positions herself in a place where she can see anyone that's coming or going from the house, but again, no answer and no luck. The server notes that the house is in a gated community, so she begins speaking to the gate guard. And the gate guard tells her that Nicki nor Kenneth have left the house recently and that there have been no drivers or cars going to pick them up or drop them off. I think the assumption here being that they probably aren't in town. So the server keeps trying. On March 12th, the server is back at the house trying to serve them, and this time the gate security guard called Nicki and Kenneth's house, and according to the process server, actually spoke directly to Kenneth Petty. The documents say that the guard told Kenneth Petty that this was a courtesy call to let him know that a process server was coming to his door and that she had a summons and a complaint for him and his wife, Onika. After the call, the server goes to the door and rings the bell, but again, no answer. The server tries this same process for the next couple days. She goes back on the 13th. The gate guard calls, let Mr. Petty know what's happening, but when the server knocks on the door, no answer. Server does it again on the 14th and the same thing on the 17th, but all of her attempts go unanswered. So at this point, Thomas and his team ask the judge if they can do a notification by publication, which is basically them saying, can we put it in the newspaper and that be considered our service? And so that's what they did. In the April 29th, May 16th, May 13th, and May 20th version of a newspaper called The Acorn, a notice was included in the newspaper alerting Nicki Minaj and Kenneth Petty that they were being sued. Of course, I looked it up. But as I'm sure you can imagine, if they didn't get it through the mail and they didn't answer the door, they definitely wasn't going to get it in the newspaper. And so again, after getting no response, Thomas and his team goes back to the judge and there's some back and forth, but eventually the judge enters a default judgment awarding Thomas over $500,000 for his lawsuit. But just like the lawsuit went unanswered, this judgment has also gone unanswered. Nicki nor Kenneth Petty have paid Thomas any of the money, and so now he's back at the courthouse asking the judge to do something else. Specifically, Thomas is asking the judge to make Nicki Minaj sell her house so that he can get his $500,000. According to him and these documents, the house is worth about $20 million. So even once you subtract what's left of the mortgage that they owe, which seems to be a little over $13 million, plus the LA County homestead exemption, which is less than $1 million, Thomas says Nicki would still have over $6 million left, and so he can get his $500,000 out of that. And so he's asking the judge, since Nicki hasn't willingly paid him, he wants this done so she can be forced to pay him. Now, a hearing date has been set for November 20th, so this whole selling of the house has not been ordered. This is just a request from the plaintiff. And so that's the recap. If y'all get sued, make sure you respond to the lawsuit. Ignoring it does not make it go away, okay?